Is Zimbabwe a failed state?
It is not. It's one of the strongest and well-organized states in Africa. In Africa, Zimbabwe is not regarded as a failed state. We are greatly loved and admired by the other 53 African countries. The only ones who say Zimbabwe is a failed state, and they use their so-called think tanks and study organizations and so forth, it's only the British and the Americans. The heads of state and government of the Southern African Development Community, or SADC, met in Dar es Salaam, and they said, we express our solidarity with the government and people of Zimbabwe, because they know that we are under assault, under siege by Britain and its allies. The United Nations voted Zimbabwe to be the chairperson, the chairman of the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development amidst opposition from Britain and its allies. You see, they wouldn't do that to a failed state. No, so the idea that Zimbabwe is a failed state is only being advanced by those who are not happy with our egalitarian revolution in Zimbabwe.
Why does Zimbabwe always get bad press?
The issue really is that there are people in the West, the governments of especially Britain and the United States, who are not happy that we redressed the colonial imbalance that we inherited.
Zimbabwe has been accused of not holding free and fair elections since 1980, when current President Robert Mugabe was first elected. He has been in power ever since. Is Zimbabwe a democracy?
The first independence elections were organized by the British, and they said we had observers from all over the world. They said they were free and fair, and the ruling party now was declared the winner. And since then, we have religiously been holding these elections every 5 years, and they have been observed by the continental body. They've always endorsed our elections. But these verdicts have been gainsaid by London and Washington. Nowhere else but London and Washington. This is arrogance. You know why? If elections take place in Portugal and the European Union sends observers there and says, we have been to Portugal, those elections are free and fair, the party that has won, you will not get an African country, Nigeria or Tanzania or Zimbabwe, crying foul and say, no, we don't believe that the elections in Portugal were free and fair, we are imposing sanctions. No, this is the arrogance of those who believe that Africa belongs to them and is still their sphere of influence. This is the arrogance of people who do not respect African institutions. You have elections taking place in a country like Zimbabwe, and the continental body, the African Union, sends observers there and declares them free and fair. And what right has London or Washington to say, we don't believe that the African Union is correct, we are imposing sanctions? This is arrogance. Elections were held in Ethiopia, for example, and after several months, the results were not out, and people were on the street protesting. They wanted to know the results. In the course of those protests, over 200 people were shot dead by the army. The same thing happened in Guinea, Conakry. There were people were out on the streets protesting against the government of President Lansana Conte, and over 200 people were shot dead by the police. This has never happened in Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, you have a leader of the opposition who is manhandled by the police, and only one protester shot dead when they make a surge on a police station. But what I'm trying to say is because the leader of the opposition came out badly bruised, and one demonstrator was shot dead. The kind of coverage that was given to the events in Zimbabwe for a whole week or 2 weeks was really shocking. People thought that the government had collapsed or the country was upside down.
Is Zimbabwe's economy on the verge of collapse?
The greatest blame for the economic recession in Zimbabwe now is the sanctions that were imposed by Britain and its allies, notably the United States and some other countries in the European Union, as a result of our land reform program. And these sanctions are a blunt instrument that are hurting our population. It is not just by governments. Even the so-called think tanks and academic institutions that are right-wing in this country, they are all involved in regime change agendas all over the world, including Zimbabwe.
Human rights organizations regularly criticize Zimbabwe for its lack of respect for human rights. How does your government respond to these accusations?
If you ask them to document which rights they're talking about, which rights are being violated, they are hard put to give you any concrete examples, because we have the right to form political parties. We are a multi-party state. We have the right of assembly, but you must inform the police. You cannot, in Zimbabwe, maybe in the United States, I don't know, you can just wake up and call for a massive rally and disrupt traffic in the city. But in Zimbabwe we say, no, you can't do that. You must inform the police so that they take the necessary precautions to ensure that your rally or your demonstration does not interrupt the normal workings of the city. And then there's the right of free speech. We have the right of you should look at some of the opposition papers in Zimbabwe, like the Independent or the Standard or the Financial Gazette. They use very foul language against the president and his ministers. But these papers are operating in Zimbabwe. So which human rights are they talking about?
What about specific accusations of torture, rape, and abuse?
We don't have that. Quite frankly, in Zimbabwe, the accusation of torture, I heard about it when the opposition leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, had his face bruised because he had led his supporters to try and storm, to overwhelm the police at the police station, and the police had to use force to subdue them. But we do not have anything, like what is there in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib.